We have included here on this slide a lot of the inspiration that has helped us put up this presentation content together. So in case you don't have the willingness to join our full program, or if you'd rather go at depth in reading all these books and articles, here's a selection of these books. And you can refer to them. Otherwise, you can stay with us today and you'll get a gist, the essence. And if you join the full program, we'll go more at depth and help you practice the various skills and values that we think are key to master these days. The red slides that you will see afterwards are practical tips. So these are really the key things that we'd like you to remember, for you to take away. We'll also have summary slides for each of the 3 sections of the things that we'll cover today. What are these 3 things that we will cover today? First of all, starting small and trying to acquire your users, your customers, one by one. Second section, how to validate your assumptions, how to know whether what you're doing is the right thing and you're not wasting your time. And thirdly, how can you be straightforward and sincere? It's actually a very good strategy to get more and more customers and more users to use your app or whatever you're trying to achieve. So let's start with the first section of this presentation. So here's the thing. I have a question for you. How many barriers, how many hurdles are you putting between you and your users, your customers, your colleagues, your partners? How many hurdles are you putting between you and them for them to get help, to even contact you, to give you feedback, to show you that you're not a machine? And here's an example. How often do you get an email from a random company? There's no need to name any of these companies. I'm sure you can relate to what I'm saying. And you get an email saying, we heard what you had to say. With all our respect, we'll get back to you in the coming days with a customer inquiry, and then you never hear back ever from them. Or the answer you get after a few days is an automated response. And it actually does not address what you're asking. Why? Why does it have to be that way? I'd rather have no response than an automated response, which means nothing at all, which shows that nobody has cared on the other end. So ask yourself that question for yourself. How many barriers are you putting between you and your users? And that's the first practical tip here. Make it super simple, super easy for people to contact you, whether they're users, customers, viewers of what you do. It should be easy for them to contact you. So put your email address out there. And don't worry about spam. And in fact, we will talk about this briefly afterwards, about email responsiveness. It's not about responding to everyone. It's about being able to process every single incoming message. So make it simple for them. I want to give you this example. I don't know how many of you know this American startup, Zappos. Zappos is an online shoe delivery company, shoe selling company, and they only exist online. They have been acquired by Amazon a few years ago, but Zappos was specifically known for going above and beyond traditional customer service. And in fact, this is what happened in a few examples of the customer service. First of all, they don't have a limited time. When they're on the phone with a customer, there is no script that they have to strictly follow, and they're not encouraged to just finish the call with the customer within 5 minutes or 10 minutes. They should spend as much time as needed to understand what the customer wants. In fact, the CEO of the company, the CEO of Zappos, one day, as a challenge, said, you can call the call center and even ask for the closest pizza restaurant places. It had nothing to do with selling shoes. And in fact, when the person called and asked for pizzas, of course the customer rep from Zappos was initially confused, but 2 minutes later he returned with a list of the 5 closest late night pizza restaurant places where the customer could go to. Another example, a woman called Zappos to return a pair of boots for her husband, who unfortunately had died in a car accident. And the next day, without even knowing that this would happen, she received a flower delivery, which the call center representative had billed to the company without even having to check with her supervisor. So that's an excellent example of customer service. In addition of this, you can see here on the screen, they have excellent benefits like free shipping both ways. You have a 1-year return policy. The call center is open at night, on the weekends, and it's no surprise that 75% of the customers come back to purchase at Zappos. So here's the practical tip. Respond to everyone who's trying to ask something from you. You don't have to spend ages with them, and you can delegate their response, but try to do your best effort to respond to everyone. Here's a counter-example of what not to do. This is a real example, and in fact, we're going to use Steve Jobs as the counter-example. Many people you may have seen the movie, you may have seen the book, you may have read the book about Steve Jobs, and you may know that Steve Jobs may have been a great innovator, but he was also not a great individual from a kindness perspective. And here's what happened. One day, I believe it was a student who was doing her PhD and was trying to get some details and data from Apple. And basically, Steve Jobs, or someone at Apple, or nobody at Apple responded, and the student was a bit upset. So she wrote that this message that you see on the screen here. I thought that if you get a message from anyone, as a client or a customer, you would always return the call. But I guess you don't really care about your customers. Do you know what Steve Jobs responded? This is actually a real example. Let me go to the next slide. You'll see the response from Steve Jobs. Nope, it's not our job. We have 300 million users back then, and we cannot respond to their requests unless they involve a problem of some kind. Sorry. That's what Steve Jobs responded. And then the student responded, "You're absolutely correct. And I do meet your criteria because I'm actually a customer and I have a question." Do you know what Steve Jobs responded after that? "Please leave us alone." Well, I can tell you that's not the best response you can give to your customer or your user. And this is Steve Jobs himself responding, not an assistant, not someone else on the call center. This is Steve Jobs himself. So my practical tip here is, if you're going to be a jerk, it's better to shut up. Just stay quiet. It's better not to respond, "Please leave us alone," than actually write it down, especially if you're the CEO, founder of the company. Do things that do not scale. Here's an example taken from Paul Graham, which I mentioned before in our previous meetups. He's the co-founder of Y Combinator, one of the most famous startup accelerators in Silicon Valley. Paul Graham, that you can see here on the photo, is also an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur. He sold his company for several $100 millions at the end of the 90s. Now here's the thing. You should take everything you can do to not just acquire customers or users, but you should also make them happy. In fact, some of the startups that went through the startup accelerator, one of these startups sent each new user a handwritten note to say thank you. Thank you for being one of our users. You can do this. Your first user should feel that signing up with you was one of the best choices they ever made. To viewing your video was the best way they spent their time. To attending a 10x MBA meetup today was the best thing you could do in your life on this day. And you in turn should be racking your brains to think of new ways always to delight them. Here's one more thing. Many startup founders ignore the fact that before the startup can become big, you need to start small. You need to start with your first user. And you can see here this quote on the slide. If you have 100 customers, 100 users today, 100 viewers of your video, if you grow by 10 the following week, so to get 110 users, that's already a growth of 10%. Try to grow 10% each week, and you'll be very surprised how big the numbers get. So surprising? Let me show you the next slide so you can get a sense of what this 10% growth every week can give you if you start with 100 users, 100 readers today, this week, and you keep growing at 10%. Let's say you have 100 users today. This is week number 1. And then you have week number 2, 110 users. And then a year later, you have 12,000 users, because this is 10% increase every single week. And a year later, after 2 years, 105 weeks, you would have 2 million users just by growing 10% every week. Now I say just, it's not easy. But the point is the rhythm, the momentum is exactly the same as when you started. Fair enough, the challenge will not be the same to deal with 2 million customers as with 100, but the growth momentum is exactly the same, and you can see this on the chart on the right. So the practical tip here is start with delighting just one user. Start with delighting one user is the path to delighting 2 million users. Now another hockey stick curve in a way, but for a completely different matter. We talked about email responsiveness. we talked about how to be responsive to people and to customers. This is part of a presentation I give at Google to my fellow colleagues, to my team members. On the x-axis, you see how responsive you are to messages that you get. The more responsive you are, the more you are on the right. Let's say you respond to 100% of your emails, you're further right on the x-axis. On the left-hand side, the y-axis is how efficient, how kind, how performing you seem to be according to your customers, to your managers, to your partners. Now you can see I struck out seem to be, and I replaced this with how efficient you are, because I have seen over and over in my work at Google, in my side projects, in my consulting practice, that it is not just perception, it's actually the performance that you actually have. The more responsive you are, the more your customers are happy, are going to buy with you. The more your clients, if you're a consultant, are going to come back to you and be happy with what you're doing. The more your boss will be happy with you. In fact, if you're not responding, and this is not me saying it, this is Eric Schmidt who said, here's the impression I have. Eric Schmidt was the CEO of Google for 10 years, between 2001 and 2011. He said if you're not responding to a message, this is the impression that the person has. It seems to say that you're too overwhelmed, you don't know when and if ever you need the feedback. And you can just wait forever, a little while longer. In fact, you know what? I don't even like you. This is the impression you're giving to your customer, that you really don't care and that maybe you don't even like them. Email responsiveness. Use data. I love using a service called gmailmeter.com. You can actually use it for free. If you know how to code app script, don't hesitate to ask over email or ask questions. I can share the code with you. And this is what I do with my email. In the blue bar here is you see when people answer back to me. If I send an email, I have about 5% of the people who respond within 5 minutes. The red bar is when I reply to emails. So I reply to all my to 14% of my emails here within 5 minutes. And you can see that in total, I respond to about 76% of my emails within 24 hours. So this is what I can use, and you can use data to track your responsiveness. So here's a quick technique. And we have a full training on this for free if you're part of the 10x MBA program. But I'm going to give you the final slide on this inbox zero technique. Inbox zero is how to go back to zero messages, whether you're using Facebook messages, WhatsApp, Gmail, whatever you're using. How can you go to zero emails at the end, or zero messages at the end of your workday? And this is the technique I've been honing and practicing every single day, and it works great for me. So maybe this will work for you. But in the full email management and time management training that we have as part of the 10x MBA program, you will see dozens and dozens of other tips. But this is the one that I think is the most powerful one. Here's what you can do when you get a message. Ask yourself the question, is your action required? And if the answer is no, the next question you should ask yourself is, are you waiting for someone else to follow up on that email? And if the answer is again no, then you can ask yourself, is that message interesting at all? And if the answer is no, that means it does not require your action, you're not waiting for anyone else, the email or the message is not even interesting, well, just archive it, delete it, or mute the conversation thread. Now, if the email or the message is interesting, add it to a reference document or forward it to someone else, to your team, to a partner, who may find it also interesting. Chances are that if you find it interesting, someone else will find the email interesting too. Let's go back one step in this decision tree. Let's go to the question whether you're waiting for someone else to act on that email. If the answer is yes, in that case, well, you can add a reminder in a calendar, in a second calendar with a link to that email. Or you could use a to-do list. Or you could use Google Keep or Evernote, whatever is practical for you to add a reminder for when you need to follow up with that person. Let's go back one step. Is your action required? For this, I need you to listen very carefully. I need you to be honest with yourself. Will your action take less or more than X minutes? And X here is your own definition of your attention span. How long can you focus on an email? Is it 30 seconds or is it 10 minutes? Chances are that it's closer to 30 seconds, 1 minute, or 2 minutes, which means that if you cannot spend 2 minutes right now, to focus on that email and respond to it, it will take more than 2 minutes, then you know what? Just leave it in your inbox, and when you will put time in your calendar, let's say 1 hour, 2 hours, where you'll just respond to emails. In fact, a good technique here is just to disconnect from Wi-Fi and respond to your emails offline. Now, if this action to respond to the email takes less than 2 minutes, for instance, well, you know what? Do it right away. You can spend that time because you just defined for yourself, you were honest. You can spend less than 10 minutes to delegate, do, or actually share that email with someone else, whatever was required to do with that email. And that's it. There's nothing more to it. So the tip here is process every message. Processing does not mean replying, does not mean reading everything. You can just glance over an email. You can set up automated filters. And during the full training, you'll be able to see that you can do this in many, many automated ways. I have tons of tricks around this. I have one more tip to share with you on this topic of email responsiveness. Here's the thing. Based on statistics that I have compiled when I was a consultant, an independent consultant about 15 years ago, I had sent 1,000 emails to random people, part of my alumni at my university, but also cold emails. And out of these 1,000 emails, I realized that if I did not follow up within 7 days, then it's unlikely I will ever get a response from that person. So here's my key tip for you. People are busy. They're distracted, just like we are. They're all distracted. We are distracted. So follow up if they have not replied to you within 7 days. One last thing on this topic of starting small. Adam Rifkin suggests that you should be willing to do something that will take you 5 minutes or less for anybody. And by doing this, you actually start a very positive circle. If you do this to someone else, you're influencing others to actually do likewise and help others and help the group for the best interest of the group. Extending this willingness to others actually pushes that willingness from these other people to yet other people. And we mentioned this when we talked about the other meetups the other days. But word of mouth is very, very powerful when you're trying to focus on the user, to try and bring in more users and more customers to whatever it is that you're creating. In summary, start small. Here are a few of the things that we've been discussing in this presentation. Make it super easy for users to contact you. Just put your email address out there, a contact form. Make sure it works. And if you're going to be not nice, it's just better to be quiet. Just shut up. Don't forget. Start with delighting. And I see there's a typo here. Sorry for this. It really bothers me when I see a typo that I've made here. Start with delighting one user. Start with 1, then 10, then 100, then try to grow 10% every single week. Remember, growing 10% every week with a baseline of 100 users will bring you to 2 million users or viewers or readers within 2 years. Process every single message. Let's go to the second section of this presentation. The second section is about validating your assumptions. And this is all about getting to know your users. First, I want to ask the question, is a focus group always necessary? Do you need to bring customers, let's say 5 or 10 in a room, and get feedback from them, get their ideas to think about what you should create? And I put this as a question mark. And the reason I put this as a question mark is because if you're extremely innovative, if you're redefining the product category that you're into, then maybe you don't need a focus group. Why? Because a lot of the times, people do not know what they want. And here you can see a quote by Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs was bad in some ways, but excellent in other ways. And here's the thing. Imagine you want to improve the music listening experience 20 years ago when we had CD players. What would be the improvement? I don't know, maybe a CD player where you could put 2 CDs at the same time. Maybe a CD player with integrated noise cancellation headphones. I don't know. It's very unlikely that a customer in a focus group would have come up with something like the iPod. It's possible, but it's unlikely. So sometimes when you're extremely innovative, it's fine to not even ask or care about what the customer wants because they don't know. Now this is very rare. This is only when you're extremely innovative. So in other cases, you will want to validate what you're trying to do. The book you're trying to write, the YouTube channel you're going to try to launch, the Instagram feed that you're trying to put together, or whatever startup you're setting up, There's a simple and very effective validation method. Ask your family and friends whether they're ready to pay for what you create. If they are not ready to do that, do you think strangers will be likely to pay as well? It's possible, but it's likely not. So ask yourself that question. It does not mean that you should change everything, but it may be worth asking yourself the question of what to change if necessary and rework your idea. Here's a validation method for less than $10. Test your product with 5 strangers, but don't do a focus group in this case. Don't ask them what you should be doing. Show them your prototype and do this one by one user, one stranger at a time. And you know how you can do this? Just ask them in a coffee shop to come and test your product. Offer them the coffee. That's why it would cost $10 for 5 strangers, or maybe even a bit less, $2 per user, and ask them for 10 minutes of their time. Show them your app, your prototype, or if you just have something on paper, just show your paper. And then ask them to try and click on the buttons. And if it's paper, tell them to just simulate. You click on this button, it would go to that other page. Do not interfere. Do not show them how they should use your app, how they should use the paper. Just take notes. Try to see where they get confused. Try to understand how they're using the app that you're trying to put together. That's it. That is simple as this. This is the best validation you can do with a total stranger for less than $10. The next step here, and this is based on my personal experience, but it sounds obvious, but it's so important to go and sell to your target user as quickly as possible. Get to know them, understand them, and as one of you asked in the questions, you may need to segment your audience to understand that they're not all the same. You need to listen to them. And I see another typo here on the screen. For those who pay attention, you will see there's another typo. I need to correct that. So go and sell to your target users as soon as possible. Here's an example of what I've done about 17 years ago. I was a student, and I was learning how to code on the side. I was in an engineering school, but I was not learning a web scripting language. So I was learning on the side. I thought it was during the dot-com boom, and I thought I'm going to sell a product. And that product was a website for real estate agencies, so they could sell houses and apartments on their own websites. Most real estate agencies back then did not have an independent website. So I built a complete turnkey solutions, a ready-made solution for real estate agencies for them to have a website ready, including a search engine on their website, so users could easily search for houses depending on the prices, depending on the size of the apartment, whether it had a swimming pool or what have you. So there was an integrated backend database. I spent 1,000 hours on it. I created all the contracts with customers. I created all the pricing strategy. I set up the business. You know how many I sold? 0. A fantastic 0 customer, because I was too shy to go to a customer. When I went there once to see a customer. He asked me to customize everything, and I thought, oh my God, this is way too difficult. I don't even know how to do this, so I gave up. I spent 1,000 hours. I still have everything on a CD. Still have the contracts on paper in a cardboard box at home. So go out there, go and try to sell. It is tough. It is difficult to get people to pay for what you're trying to create. So try and do that as soon as possible. Here's one key example of what you can do when it comes to using data. I love data. You have seen this with email responsiveness. But here's one thing you can do when it comes to using data for knowing what you should do, let's say, on your website. And this is called A/B testing. You may not know whether your content should be on the left-hand side or the right-hand side of your website, or you should use a certain image as opposed to another image. In fact, I have in mind for Obama's campaign, the first presidential campaign, he actually tested 3 different banners on his campaign website, 3 different images and 3 different buttons for people to donate for the campaign. And based on that, he found out that I think the button which said donate now was more effective than any other button, and showing an image of a family was more effective than showing an image of a couple or of himself on the website. So you can use various A/B testing mechanisms to be able to segment your audiences, and you may see that maybe Indonesians may prefer a certain type of website as opposed to another website. So you may want to test this in many different ways. In fact, this is one of our other values for 10x MBA, is using data for most of the things that you do in life. So if you're interested, check our website and apply to the program. In summary, for validating your assumptions, here are a few tips that we went through today very quickly. And as again, Marina has mentioned, today is a top-down presentation. We take some of your questions. We'll do a very quick workshop. But during the 10x MBA program, we would spend most of a 3-hour to a 4-hour workshop to do hands-on projects. So you'll be able to practice this right away. And in between the workshops, we'll be sending you out there to test some of your ideas and the things that you have learned through the program. So here's a summary for today for this section. You don't always need a focus group when you're innovating a lot. Ask your family and friends, are they going to pay for what you're creating? If not, maybe think twice about what you need to change. Test your product with 5 strangers. It won't cost you more than $10 and you'll get a lot of insight. Go sell and listen to your users. And finally, use data as much as possible. All right, we're at the third part of this presentation, how to be straightforward and sincere with your users, because this can go a long way in convincing them to go with what you're creating. And I mentioned that the other day, but for those who have not heard this before, I asked my ex-boss in the past why he kept praising me to others. I felt uncomfortable with his compliments. And he said, Sebastian, you make many mistakes. You make a lot of mistakes. No, this is not me crashing my boss's car. It's not even my car. It's just an illustration. But so I was confused. Why? How is that a compliment? Why is he praising me if I make a lot of mistakes? Well, the key thing here was that I don't make the same mistake twice. And he was praising me for learning from my mistakes. And again, I have not crashed my ex-boss's plane. This is again an illustration. Don't think I'm such a bad driver or pilot. I don't even have a pilot license anyway. So the key point here is embrace failure. You don't have to fail. It's not necessary. But the worst thing is not to fail. The worst thing is not to feel bad about being shy and not going to the customer. Is to fail and not learn anything from it. The key thing here, Yayan, is that if you're shy and you recognize it, at least you're learning. You know what's the problem. You know that you're shy, so you know you can work on it. You're learning from what you can't do. And if you never manage to do it, it's okay. Don't beat up yourself. It's fine, right? You don't have to do something. And praise already yourself for everything that you're doing, for using analytics, for working long hours on your project, at work, on your startup. What's the worst that can happen anyway? You're still alive. You'll still find food. And if you're struggling with money to the point that you can't feed yourself, you have one email address, contact@10xmba.com. We will make you work so you can earn a living. Don't worry. So try what you can, do the best you can do, and we want to hear from you. Tell us what you create. By embracing failure and admitting that you messed up, you will actually make yourself vulnerable, and it nurtures empathy. People will have more empathy for what you're trying to achieve. Again, if you go to the customer and the customer tells you, you know what, your product is really bad, I don't like it, you've never responded to my emails, I wanted this feature, you have not developed it, I don't like what you're doing, then you can say, well, sorry, you're right, I messed up on this one. I'm sorry I cannot develop for that feature anyway for X, Y, and Z reason, but thank you for your feedback. By having this attitude, I can bet you that most of the time the customer will become softer. We'll try to help you work things out and say, you know what, again, this is fine. Let's go with features 1 and 2. I actually can work with this, and I'll go with another vendor, another startup, another solution for that other part that I need. But can you respond to my emails more quickly next time? Right? So you'll find a solution by embracing failure and admitting that you messed up. You don't have to admit it publicly, but you could even create a blog post out of this and say, and thank the customer for his great feedback. I'll give you an example. I mentioned this the other day for those who joined me in the masterclass the other day, but I'm creating a drone videography channel on YouTube. And I realized at the last minute, too late, that one of the music that we used on the video had a copyright. In theory, it had not. It was Creative Commons and an attribution license, but for whatever reason we messed up. It was actually copyright. Now we emailed the copyright holder, the musician, the artist, and the thing is that person responded right away and said, you know what, I'm going to try and make things work so we can remove the copyright just for you because I love the video that you created. And just because of that, my response was twofold. First of all, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I said again, thank you. Like, I'm so happy to receive a response from you. The second thing that I came to my mind, that if we do get the copyright waived on that music, I'll probably write a story about it. I'll probably write a blog post. And on my Google Plus, if you're not following me, you don't have to, but there's almost 1 million people following me. So 1 million people would hear about this artist, which nobody has ever heard of, just because he has shown kindness to me, and he doesn't even know me. He doesn't know where I'm from, but this is my direct reaction. So this is an example of how you can turn something and create a bigger story out of it. So if you failed, you can even make this useful for you, and people will find you particularly kind and honest, but it has to be sincere. Add a bit of humor in everything you do. So over the Hangout, you cannot project the video very nicely. So I'm not going to bore you with this, but if you go to this link, it will take you to a YouTube video, which I love. bit.ly/DSC in capital letters, DSC teaser. DSC stands for Dollar Shave Club. And I love this video. It's from a startup called dollarshaveclub.com. It's an online business which sends razor blades for $1 a month in the US. And they've created this hilarious video about their startup. It has 25 million views. And guess what? This company has been successful. 2 years ago, this company has sold to Unilever for $1 billion. For $1 billion, it sends razor blades for $1 a month, and that's it. It's sold to Unilever. Unilever, which sells razor blades via all their brands that they own. So look at this video. You can add humor in whatever you do. I wish I could stream this video right now, but it's not going to play very nicely. So take a look at it. bit.ly/DSC teaser, or on YouTube, search for Dollar Shave Club, and you will see what I mean. And hopefully you will laugh just as much as I laughed. The true measure of a man is how he treats someone who can do him absolutely no good. So why give to people and to your users without any expectations? Here are a few reasons as to why to do this. First of all, if you're giving, if you're listening to your user, even if it takes a lot of time on your side, it's a personal human connection that you're building. Also, it makes others happy. It will make you happy. Chances are that it will make you feel much better because you have taken the time to listen to someone else. The third reason, it shows appreciation, it shows respect. They have taken the time to listen to you. They have taken the time to write to you. They have taken the time to use your products or to watch your video. So it shows really gratitude that they have spent that time for you. It has an impact. Reassure them in a way that makes them feel right in choosing you. Also, it helps with word of mouth. I've mentioned this before. By making them happy, it's very likely that they will talk to others about it. I've mentioned dollarshaveclub.com to you. I've never been a customer of them, and I mention it to you. And chances are some of you will mention it to your friends or your family or your colleagues. Imagine the power of word of mouth if one day Dollar Shave Club goes to Indonesia and starts selling. People will already know the brand, or if they do a partnership with others like Tokopedia, let's say in Indonesia, or Flipkart in India. You never know what will happen next. It strengthens your reputation, so give without expectation. Do not let your behavior come in their way. I'm a huge cinema buff. I love cinema, and if you have not seen this film, it's a film from, I think, the 1950s, and it's called 12 Angry Men. It's fantastic. It's fantastic for many reasons, and I'm not going to go and give you the reasons as to why this film is fantastic, but among other things, I'll give you one reason. You see 12 white men in a room who discuss, they're part of a jury, whether they should condemn to death or acquit a black boy of murder. And they discuss, and you can see how they interact with each other. Some of them get angry, some of them yell, some of them swear, and you can see how one is more convincing than the other by having a very calm attitude. It's the main actor, and I really encourage you to see this film. It's the 1950s, but it's incredibly modern. I've watched this movie twice, and that means a lot because I never, ever read a book twice or watch a film twice because of there's so many interesting things out there and my life is limited, that I make it a key principle to not do all things twice if I can avoid it. But I love this so much that I really encourage you to search for this movie, 12 Angry Men, and you'll see how sticking to rational arguments and never putting your behavior, your bad behavior in to come in the way, will go a long way in convincing the other person. In summary, be straightforward, be honest, don't forget, remain sincere, embrace failure, add a bit of humor, give without expecting, and do not let your behavior come in the way.